immediate company of dismissed. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
Well, welcome to another Sky Blue History podcast with myself and Jim Brown. And tonight, joining us, club legend, is Steve Ogrizovic, FA Cup winner, of course, from 1987, and our record appearance man as well, isn't he, Jim, I believe?
601 appearances and 1 goal.
That's a lot.
Good evening, Claudio and Jim.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
And of course, in your cupboard, you've got 2 European Cup winners' medals, a Super Cup runners-up medal, is that right?
I have somewhere, yeah. I'm not quite sure where they are at the moment. I keep moving them around.
And did you win 2 Charity Shields with Liverpool as well? Have you?
A number of Charity Shields events when they were there. Liverpool was so good at the time. They just seemed to... they had an appointment at Wembley every single year. So it was nice to be part of a lot of that. In the Charity Shield, you know, I'm trying to think if we were on the bench in those days for Charity Shield. Certainly for the European Cup. The 78 one at Wembley when Liverpool beat Bruges, and then 1981 in Paris when we beat Real Madrid. I was on the bench in those, so yeah, they were good memories.
Well, that's of course what's happened at the club recently was the sacking of Mark Robins. So myself and Jim, and I spoke to you the other week, Steve. We said we'd love to have you on. But you must be, I mean, although you love talking about the FA Cup and your goal at Sheffield Wednesday, I'm sure there's something else we can talk about of your long career at our club. And Jim said, well, what about all the managers? Take it away, Jim.
Okay, good evening, Steve. Yeah, welcome. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
You know, you joined the football club in 1984 as a player. You retired in 2000. You became head of the academy. You had even a spell as caretaker manager, and then the last few years you were the goalkeeping coach. I make it 34 years you were at the club, and I just thought when we were talking about what we could talk about tonight, I thought how many management changes have there been during Steve's time at the club, and I made it 23, and that doesn't even include the caretaker managers. And I just thought it'd be nice if you could give us your angle on some of those changes, not necessarily the managers, but you know what happened at the changeover. You know how it sort of how the sacking or the resignation occurred and the appointment of the replacement.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that
well,
okay?
The first thing, Jim, is when you mentioned 23 managers, that's a long time in a short space of time in a career. I'm starting to think I was probably the problem. And
Yes.
The moment I retired, Mark Robins managed to stay another five years after that in count. Yeah.
He did, didn't he? Yes. You went and some stability came to the club.
Some stability came, yes. All right, I'm going to say.
Yeah.
I mean,
and of course, the first man, the man who brought you to Coventry was Bobby Gould, and he didn't last long as manager after you arrived, did he?
Well, he didn't, no. He'd already been there a year, and he'd got a particularly tough job, Bobby had. He was a young manager as well. And I think people forget the job that he did at Coventry in that particular time, because he had to almost rebuild the side. And he brought in some very, very good players. A lot of the players, in fact, went on to play in the FA Cup final 3 years later. What Bobby was very good at was bringing, or finding young talent, and managers and coaches had to do it themselves in those days. There was no database, no watching videos, Y-Scout, or, the things that they do now. They had to do the hard yards, get in the car, up and down the motorway, go to watch these games, make a little list of players they fancied, probably go and watch them again. They might have 2 or 3 people that would do that for them as well. And somewhere along the line, they'd come up with a list of players they wanted to sign. And I think if you have a look at Bobby Gould's signings during that period, there were some very, very good ones. And people have got to remember that. He rebuilt the side really in those early 80s. And he was a tad unfortunate to lose his job the way that he did do as well.
Did you know you've been scouted, Steve?
Sorry, well, not at the time. I didn't know. I mean, I'd spent four and a half years at Liverpool, generally as an understudy to Ray Clements, and I couldn't shift him. He was the England goalkeeper, and he was, the best goalkeeper with Peter Shilton that England had got. So I was always going to be a number 2, and he very rarely got injured. So my games at Liverpool were limited. I think 5 or 6 games. And what I needed, in 1982 was a period where I was going to play some football. And the fact that I was a young player, didn't have a lot of experience, meant I had to drop down a league. So I went to Shrewsbury, who were then Division 2, Championship as it would be now, and had a couple of very good seasons there, thoroughly enjoyed my time. And, there's a great vine in football. You know that people are watching. But I didn't specifically know it was Coventry, and I think John Sillett had been to see me a few times. He was a coach for Bobby Gould during that period. He'd seen me a number of times, and he'd recommended me to Bobby. I think Bobby had been down and had a look, and that's really how it all happened. I didn't know it was going to be Coventry. I thought it might be, a number of other clubs that I'd heard about. But as soon as Coventry came knocking, it appealed to me. It was Premiership football, or wasn't Premiership football then, was it? It was Division 1 football, but it was the top league, and I knew they had a good young side, and I was excited to join them and actually get some experience playing in the top league.
Mm-hmm. So I remember a game at Leicester where at Christmas in '84 it would have been, where Bob actually came onto the pitch. That was probably his penultimate game, I think.
It was. I mean, that was almost the end of it, really, I think. And I think the pressure was building in that season. We'd not had a particularly good start to the year. As I say, the young players that we've got were still, we were still fighting, we were playing, but a lot, we were learning to play as a team, really. And that particular game, it wasn't going very well. You're right. It was just before Christmas, I think, and Leicester were awarded a penalty. I can't remember if it was for the first or second goal. And, I remember lining up thinking, right, I've got to go and goal here and try and save this. The next minute, I see Bobby Gould, who's the manager. He's on the 18-yard box. I wonder what's happening here. And, he walked on. I thought he was going to confront the referee or speak to some of our players. Had somebody gone down injured? I didn't know what had happened. But it was strange. He walked on, didn't do a great deal, and just walked off behind the goal and went back to the dugout. Which was a strange thing to do, really, and I think that shows probably the pressure that managers are on, at the time, because I think everybody knows what Coventry City means to Bobby Gould. It's his life. That's where he started as a player, managed the club twice. So it got to him then, and then shortly after, he obviously got fired, which was a disappointment for a lot of the players, particularly ones that he brought in. And I remember. He's still quite comical in those days. I remember somebody saying over Christmas, I think he did an interview, didn't he? Somebody says, "What's Santa bought you for Christmas, Bob?" And Bob says, it's like this. He says he's come round, he's delivered all the toys. He got to me. He said the only thing left was the sack, and that's where he left it.
Was he quite an emotional manager, Steve? It come across like that. He wore his heart on his sleeve, didn't he?
Yeah, he did do, and I think he was a good manager for young players. I think a lot of the older players, I'm thinking particularly of his second spell, which we'll probably get onto later. He found older players a little bit more difficult to deal with, but he did. He wore his heart on his sleeve, and he always wanted what was best for the club. The problem is during those days, it's like everything. We couldn't sign the best players. If we had somebody that was playing well, generally they'd be transferred somewhere else. So year on year, it could be a struggle.
So the man who stepped into the hot seat was Don Mackay, who'd not long been recruited as first team coach, had he?
Yeah, that's right. And that invariably happens in football, doesn't it? The manager will bring in a number 2. They don't do very well. The manager goes, the number 2 steps up to be the number 1. And Don Mackay did that. And again, another young manager. He'd come from Scotland. He was an ex-goalkeeper. So I had a bit of a, I had a connection with him, really. We used to have a laugh and a joke about goalkeeper. I used to have a laugh and a joke about Scottish goalkeepers in those days, to be quite honest. And, he was always up for that. Very, very nice guy. Very difficult job, to manage the club during that period. And, I think he just tried... the football wasn't particularly good to watch. The results weren't great, and I think he just struggled to get it going at Coventry, really. Yes,
although obviously he was. I remember going to Old Trafford to see us play there. We won 1-0 in the league against a very good United
we did.
team.
And you've also got to remember, and bearing in mind he took over at the end of December '84, January '85. He also managed to mastermind the Great Escape, and that was a great escape in '84, '85, because, just for people who are not familiar, during Easter, I think it was, we had a bit of a flu outbreak, injury outbreak, and a number of our games were postponed. We were struggling at the bottom of the league, and of course, the games were starting to tot up at the end of the season. Now, in today's day, you make sure that everybody plays at the same time, on the same day at the end of the season, so that there's no shenanigans with results or anything like that. But things weren't quite as refined then, and the final day of the season came. We played, and we'd still got 3 games left, and all the teams at the bottom had finished their games. And I remember, I think it was Norwich who were 8 points in front of us, but we had those 3 games in hand. So basically, we had to win the 3 games. Now, nobody gave us a prayer. And to be fair to Don Mackay, who set the team up well, he kept the team confident. He said, "Look, we can do this, boys. We've got, I think we've got 2 of the games were at home and 1 away." And the first one was Stoke City. They'd already been relegated, so that was away. And I think Stuart Pearce scored sometime in the second half. The ironic thing about that game was they got a penalty with about 10 minutes to go, and a lad called Ian Painter was their assigned penalty taker. If he'd have scored, and 1 each, we probably would have gone down that season. But I'd like to say that I saved it, or put him off. But as I dive right, he fired it left, hit the crossbar, bounced down. I think he hit it that hard, it bounced down, actually bounced out the area. We survived, managed to win that game 1-0. But the ironic thing was that we signed Ian Painter in the summer, and that led to the conspiracist theory that we'd done a deal with him, prior to the game and everything, to miss that penalty. And we found that quite humorous, because if that was the case, he did pretty well. He hit the bar, it bounced down probably a yard off the post. It was never that accurate with his shooting, so I don't think it would have been that good. But that was 1 game down. I think we played Luton a few days later. All this was in the space of a week as well. We beat Luton, I'm going to say, was it 1-0? I think Brian Kilcline scored. Yeah. Jim,
quite late on,
It was. That was another late goal. Good result, because Luton were a decent side. I think they finished in the top 7 or 8 that year. So that was a really good result to get that. So that was 2 down, 2 games gone, 6 points. So we needed to win the last game. It was a Sunday morning, right at the end of May. And it just happened to be against the league champions that year, Everton. People again, they had a fantastic side, so it was always going to be difficult. What helped us was that by that time, Highfield Road was packed out. Every single ticket was sold. And I think what also helped is the fact that they'd had a holiday, because they were waiting for a couple of weeks for the season to finish. They'd been on holiday, come back, and were probably not in the best the best prepared state to take us on. With a full house on that day, with what was at stake, I don't think even if they'd have been, playing at the best, they would have stopped us that day. We were just magnificent. I think we won it 4-1. Goals from, I think Mickey Adams got 1, Cyril Regis. I can't remember the other scorers as it happened.
Yeah, Cyril got 2 and Terry Gibson.
That's right, and Terry Gibson, top goal scorer. Terry scored a lot of goals that year, good striker. And that was just a brilliant win. And I can't tell you, that just did wonders for the team spirit. We had a good connection of players at the time, and it was just a marvellous achievement. People still talk about it now, and when you look at it, to win your last 3 games of the season when you're a team down at the bottom, it was an incredible feat.
It was on my birthday, the final game. I was away and I missed it.
All right.
And
Did you? Well, you missed a classic, Claudio, let me tell you.
Yeah.
I had to ring up from Cornwall because it wasn't on the radio. There was no teletext where I was staying. I had to ring up my dad's pub in Bubbenhall, and the barmaid picked up and she went, "It's okay, you won." And that was all I needed to know. I could carry on with the holiday. But
Yeah.
Everton,
Well,
Everton
I mean, yeah.
more matches. They still had 2 more matches after our match. It was a ridiculous season.
It was, and you know, as I say, I'm not saying they lay down for us, but things were probably a little bit easier by virtue of the fact that they'd already won the league. But it's still a tough game, and Jim, you must have been at the game. You remember the emotions, the crowd, the invasion. You always got a crowd invasion at the end of the season in those days, and that was no different. But you know, we actually felt we'd achieved something. We'd managed to just stay up, but the fact we'd won those 3 games, we've got survival for another year. You know, it actually felt like we'd won something that year. Those celebrations were incredible.
One of my recollections of that period of 3 games. Well, I was at the penultimate game before the 3 when we drew at Ipswich in a night game.
0-0. Remember that one? Yeah.
And I remember the train back to London with the London supporters, and the mood was just so bad. You know, we were down because Norwich had won at Chelsea on that night, and it extended the lead over us to, as you say, 8 points. But my main recollection of that is Cyril. He'd not had a good season at all, had he? He didn't score many goals. He didn't really look up for it, to be honest. And yet, on the day against Everton, he was a man like a man possessed.
Yeah, he was. I mean, he's our star man, Cyril was, and I think you're quite right. It did take him time to settle with Coventry. I think he'd left a team, you know, West Bromwich Albion, that were free-flowing football, had some good players. And I think the problem with Coventry at that time is, as I say, we had new players, young players that were still knitting together. And there's no doubt about it, we never played to Cyril's strengths. You know, we knew he was quick and strong. And I think, you know, the managers, Don Mackay, you know, probably ended up losing his job the following season because of this, because he couldn't get the best out of Cyril. You know, we're playing the ball in too long, we're playing in channels. That wasn't his game. You know, as John Sillett, you know, would have told you at the time. You know, we changed our game to suit Cyril, and that was another year, you know, to come. But in those days, it was a case of, there it goes, Cyril, in the back. We know you're quick. Go and run onto it. And it could make 1 or 2 runs, but he'd be shattered after that. I mean, his lungs were about the size of, well, they weren't very big. It was a dynamic runner, but, you know, by his own admission, he would say that he'd need a lot of time to recover, and we just weren't getting the best out of him. We weren't playing the football to suit him.
No, and so moving on to Don's departure, I think there was only 3 games left in the following season when the board obviously took the decision to get rid of Don. But was that a surprise to you? That
I don't think it was a surprise, because yet again we were struggling at the end of the season. I think we'd just been beaten 4 or 5 against Liverpool just prior to that. I can't remember if it was this game before his departure, but I mean, we got absolutely battered that day. You know, and I remember Brian Burrows going down injured at the edge of the box. I think we were 4-0 down. I've gone to Brian and say, you know, normally you say get out quickly, we get past it. Brian, take as long as possible. This could be a cricket score. And said to the referee at the time, I says, how long's left? 5, 10 minutes? He says, no, there's still 23 minutes yet. So we were thinking this score could be anything because we'd gone. But, you know, thankfully from Liverpool's point of view, I think they'd realised they'd got the 4. They just played tippy-tappy at the back, and it ended up 4 or 5. And, you know, we probably got away with a bigger hiding. But, yeah, I think the board could see that, you know, we needed a change. Something needed to change, and invariably with managers, that's what happens. You know, you have a situation, you look at a team, and you think a different voice, a different name, certainly might make a short-term difference. And you know, with a few games to go to the end of the season, I think that was what the board felt at that time.
Yes. Now, I think for me, one of the most intriguing management departures in the club's history was when John Sillett was sacked and Terry Butcher was brought in. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, John, for me, the best football that we played, the most successful football that we played, and the most enjoyable football we played really was under John Sillett's reign. I mean, he was at the club, I don't know, 4.5 years, wasn't he? And, he's with John, and it was a partnership. We talk about the partnership now of Mark Robins and Adi Vivash. That was a really strong partnership, and they worked well together. They bounced off each other. George would be the organiser. I think he had one foot in the, on the board. I think he had a post on the board anyway. So when it came down to decisions other than football, George could always make them instantly. Didn't have to go and ask for permission. He would make the decisions, and that worked out really well. John was generally the brains on the training pitch, the tactician. Generally the manager in those days, the one that would talk tactics, that would give team talks. And George would back them up. But as a pair, they worked brilliantly together. And they took over when Don Mackay left. I think we needed. It was a better season than the season before, where we needed to win the last 3 games. I think we needed to win just 2 out of the last 3. And we managed that one again. Queen's Park Rangers on the final day at Highfield Road. I think we won 2-1. It was tight. It was tense, but we got the job done. And after that game during that summer, I think that's where George and John were confirmed as managers. And it was just a brilliant time. I mean, that's all I can say. And it, to answer your question, it was a big shock 4.5 years later when John was given the bullet.
My brother-in-law is part of the new newspaper archive thing where you can get all your information, and he put he put our surname in, and apparently there's loads of me writing stuff in the pink. It came up, and some of the headlines, there's like Sillett promises so hollow now. There was a lot of, surprisingly, although we say I can't believe he was sacked, there was a lot of disgruntled Coventry City fans at the time, because I think what happened after the FA Cup with the defeats at Sutton and Watford the following year after the FA Cup, and then Northampton as well. I think the whole, I think we expected more, and it was like all the blame fell on John for some reason.
And I think that's the problem. I think as a football club, fans particularly have to manage their own expectations. Mark Robins has talked about this a number of times through his tenure. You tend to think if you're successful one year, you're going to go even better the year after. Football doesn't work that way. You have to realise, or people have to realise, where Coventry City were then. They were playing in the top league against the best teams, and we certainly weren't. Probably paying the same money in transfer fees, etc., that all the other clubs were. So year on year, it was always going to be a struggle, because if you had good players that were doing particularly well, you'd often sell them on. And, the manager would then have to find somebody else that was equally as good. And, and so it goes on. And at that particular time, I think that, John Sillett had not just won the FA Cup, with George, but we'd had a couple of very comfortable years in Division 1, and people expected us to kick on and do more, rather than actually be thankful that we're mid-table, above mid-table. A cup run would have been handy. The defeats against Sutton and Northampton in the FA Cup certainly, didn't help things. But generally speaking, we were still a comfortable side in Division 1. Things were going okay, and John and George just knew the team so well, and they knew how to, they knew how to build the club. They knew how to keep it successful. The problem is breaking into that top 6, top 7 was very difficult with the money that we had available.
Well, yeah, I think, the stats speak for themselves. Well, under John, we didn't have a relegation battle.
No, we didn't. I mean, he inherited a relegation battle when he first came in, but after that, it was, it was boring middle of the table for some people, and it's quite nice for us as players. You don't.
We had that one season when I think we beat Arsenal at Highfield Road in a night game, and we went up to 4th in the table.
Well, we did. Well, we did,
Yeah.
and there was another one that people don't realise. Was it '89, wasn't it, when we got beat by Sutton? And it was a freak result. We were poor on the day away from home. Everybody's seen it. That happened to be on Match of the Day, so it's painful even now to see the replays every cup whenever the cup comes along. But what people don't realise is, although we lost that game, we were still doing well. We went to Norwich the week after, and I'll give you an idea of how good a manager John was, and George. They got us together the Sunday after the Saturday game and said, "Look, you're going to get dog's abuse for this result. Probably deservedly so." He said, "But we're going to take you out of Coventry. Get away from the fans. We've still got important league games. We've got Norwich next week. Get yourselves, pack your bags. We're off down to Norwich for the week." And that's what we did. We went home, got the bags packed, and we had a fantastic time. And it wasn't boot camp down there because we'd had a bad result. It was a few games of golf, good training, put a few things right, but actually build the camaraderie up again because we'd had a really poor result, and we were getting stick from everybody. The big thing is, in those days, obviously, you didn't have your mobile phones or anything. It was just papers. They told us, don't read any papers. The fact that we were out of Coventry meant that, we weren't bumping into fans on a daily basis that were reminding us of what happened. So we had a pretty good week. We played Norwich, who were, I'm going to say, second at the time. So it was a difficult away game. We beat them 2-1, was it? 1-0, 2-1.
2-1, yeah.
And we went fourth ourselves in the league, and that might be the time when you were doing it. So even though we'd been beaten by, a non-league side, we were a good side. We went fourth over Christmas, or just after Christmas.
Yeah.
And, a lot of the recovery was down to, George and John's managerial prowess.
Yeah, well, Steve, Norwich, before that game, Norwich had only lost twice all season. They were unbeaten at home.
I knew you know that, Jim. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
And so that shows just what a good performance it was.
It was.
I think I would have swapped it for beating Sutton the week before, but at least we managed to repair some of that damage.
Was that the speedy chip? Was it that game?
That's right. Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Last minute.
Yeah.
I was right behind the goal, amongst a lot of Norwich fans. Had a muted celebration.
Yeah.
Well, there would have been because as I say, they were doing really well at the time, Norwich. So
There weren't many City fans there.
No, we're in those days. I mean, Gates weren't brilliant, were they? In the late '80s, early '90s. They started to build up in the mid '90s once the Premier League or Premiership started to, to be born.
So the Terry Butcher arriving, that was a major surprise. They brought in an unknown manager, untried manager.
Well, untried manager, but a very well-known person. I mean, he'd been England captain, God knows how many caps. Really nice guy, Terry Butcher. The biggest problem he had was he came in as a player manager, which in those days, I won't say it was universally popular that teams had player managers, but it wasn't unheard of. And he was going to come in, he was going to play, and he was going to learn the ropes under his number two, Mickey. Forgot his name now. From Stoke, Mick Mills, and Mick was quite experienced, so the two of them were going to do it that way. The big problem was Terry came with a bad knee, and I think it was a problem about him, probably not mentioning the knee, and he played very, very few games. So we got an inexperienced manager, somebody that had come in on a very big contract, a lot of it, to actually play because he was a top centre half at the time. That would have certainly helped us on the pitch. But, if he was lame and he couldn't play, that was half of his effectiveness gone already.
He played, as you say, played very few games, but I think not long after he came, the ownership of the club changed, didn't it? And John Poynton sold his shares, or Peter Robbins and Brian Richardson came in, and I got the impression that Terry's card was marked from that point on?
It probably was. Results weren't going great. I think Mick Mills had gone, so it severed that relationship. I think towards the end of his tenure. And then, you're quite right. John Poynton, who'd been a very successful chairman, really. He bought his FA Cup success, run it from Jersey. And he was a really nice guy, John, very approachable, lived in Jersey, but he came over every game. And we had some great times with John. And he just had enough, I think. He felt that it was time to hand over. And that's what he did. And what normally happens with managers and why you have managerial changes is generally speaking, it's either poor results or, a change at boardroom level who want to bring in their own people. And, that's what really did for Terry Butcher.
So moving on, we had a brief period under Don Howe, which I think we'll skip over.
Well, I wouldn't skip over it because Don Howe, and again, people look at him as a manager and his results were not very good and they say he was very negative and everything. He was a better coach than manager, there's no doubt about that. But I'll tell you, he was the best coach that certainly I'd worked with in football prior to that. An incredibly good coach. And it always amused me when people used to say he was defensive because certainly, when he was coaching, everything was played. He explained it brilliantly. The training sessions were fun, and invariably you always ended up with something that was attack minded. An effort on goal, shot on goal, or something like that. So certainly his coaching wasn't like that. But I think he, I think he probably set his sides up defensively. And, the bit going forward, especially when you're a struggling club, never really materialised for him. So we played some really poor defensive football at the time. We just couldn't score goals, I remember. And I remember one period where I kept 4 or 5 clean sheets, I think, in that period. And we never won one. I think we had 4 or 5 clean sheets and picked up 5 points. And they don't get you away from the bottom of the league. That's where we were when he took over, and we survived the last day of the season. I think that was the Aston Villa one, was it, Jim?
Yes.
And that's the first time when we've played in a relegation battle at the end of the season where we haven't actually survived ourselves. We got beat that day. And fortunately, the results went for us. But every other relegation battle, we've managed to actually, win and do the hard work ourselves.
Yes. So Bobby Gould returned and had another season and a bit in charge. Again, he brought in lots of players from lower divisions, some who worked. People like John Williams worked, from day one.
Saw John yesterday.
Did you?
I did, yeah.
He's been living on his goals at Tottenham and his 100-metre sprint win for the last 30 odd years, hasn't he?
He did. He was quick, and he had a little bit of an impact in those early days as well at Coventry. I can remember that. But I think that was the start of modern football, wasn't it? That was when the Premiership or the Premier League was born, 1992-3, was it? And
yes.
And you had all the you had the kits, didn't you? Sky started to televise live games on a Sunday and Monday. Can't remember if we had a Friday game then. I don't think we did, but you could see money being invested, things were changing, and the game was getting bigger. Every day that you played it. Yes.
Obviously, Bobby. There was the Bobby left after the defeat at QPR, controversially resigning in the toilets at Loftus Road. What's your recollection of that day?
Well, again, I mean, I think he was a bit, he's a bit of a Marmite character for the squad then. Some of the players, and again, younger players generally, were thinking he was doing a good job, and some of the older players, were probably not having him at the time. He was finding it difficult, I think, and that was a tough game for him to lose 5-1. I don't know if he did it. I don't think, the sack wasn't coming. He was a good manager. He could have overcome that, but I think emotionally, he probably either felt embarrassed or something happened. And it just seemed to be a knee-jerk decision. He came in after the game and just said, "Lads, I've called it a day. I've gone to see the chairman. I'm quitting." And the changing room, I've got to say, was a little bit mixed. There were some that were really disappointed he was going, and some that were quite relieved. And some felt it was time for a change. And that's probably the first time I'd noticed that in for any manager prior to that, and even after, that had lost the job. I've not seen probably a changing room quite as split as that one was. And I think it was time for Phil Neal then, who was his number two, yet another number two that was brought in by the manager who ended up becoming manager. Yeah.
And Phil wasn't everybody's cup of tea, was he?
Well, he wasn't, but I think probably because, yet again, I mean, Coventry were playing catch up really with a lot of the other clubs in the time. They were never spending the money that most of the other teams were spending in the league. So, it was difficult to get a foothold into the league. We actually didn't do that bad at times. Certainly with Bobby, the year prior to him going, I think we finished halfway up the league. So things were okay. I can't remember where we finished when Phil took over the first year. But I think we were okay.
It was pretty good.
Struggle, and
we were comfortably mid-table.
Right, comfortably mid-table. So you see, there was no real, and again, this makes you wonder why all of a sudden Bobby Gould decided to leave. It seemed a strange decision at the time, and and again, Phil, I knew Phil from as a player at Liverpool. I mean, incredible footballer Phil was. Even when he used to play in the five-a-sides, which he regularly did. He'd be our best player. He was incredible for that. Great vision, lovely touch, knew the game, and did okay as a manager. I've got to say, did okay.
I think the documentary he did with Do I Not Like Orange with Graham Taylor didn't help, did it? Because he just came across as somebody who kept repeating what Graham was saying, and I think as Cov fans, you thought, "Oh, is that what he's like then?" But obviously, he probably wasn't like that. It's just.
It wasn't, no. It was portrayed very badly. He came over as a yes man. Anything that Graham Taylor said, he tended to agree with, and yeah, and all that. And he wasn't that. I mean, he was his own man. You don't have a career like he has, without making independent decisions. But I saw that documentary. I thought was not very nice. But for Graham Taylor, and for Phil Neal and a few others and everything like that, didn't paint them in a good light. Graham Taylor lost his job, after that. Was he the right man for England during that period? Well, that's for other people to judge. But he was certainly a very, very good footballing man and had a lot of success and knew how to set teams up.
Well, without dwelling on it, I think England got done over by the referee that night. Moving on.
Well, we did do. And, again, it was the style of football that was being played in England at the time. I mean, we'd had... because of Heysel and everything like that, we'd had quite a period, out of European football. It cost us European football as a football club when we won the FA Cup in '87. And I think the style of football, probably got left behind a little bit. The continent were playing a lot more, there was more keep ball football abroad than there was in the English league. A lot of teams were direct, playing it long. Graham Taylor got levelled at that, playing long in an international game where everybody else was keeping the ball. So, there was, I'm not going to say it was a particularly entertaining period during English football. I think the mid-90s was, it was rediscovering itself again, I think, after the years from Europe.
There was a stat where from every kickoff, I think it was 51 kickoffs in a row, that England passed the ball back and kicked it straight down to the corner flag. That was the tactic. So
well, in those days, do you remember Wimbledon? I mean, they were the Route 1 masters and they were successful in Division 1 and the Premiership when that was born. And that's what they used to do. In fact, players could actually, you can't believe this, but you could actually put a bet on at the bookies, and what they'd do, they'd bet against the first corner Sorry, the first throw in, and who'd have it. And all they do is they win the toss, they put it down in the far corner, and they clear up because they won. The opposition had won a corner down there. So you could get away with those things in those days. And the style of football for a lot of clubs was very direct, and Route 1 a lot of the time, I think.
Yeah.
So Phil had a great season, that 93-4 season. The club finished 11th, which would be the highest they finished in the post-Sillett era. So, history doesn't look kindly on Phil, but if you look at the stats, he had a pretty good record at the club. But of course, he was replaced by, suddenly we had a revolution. Brian Richardson went out and got Big Ron. What was that like?
Exactly that, and that was Brian Richardson. And again, I know people talk about Brian Richardson's reign. I can only speak in the early days with Brian. Brian was very, very good in the early days for the football club because he wanted to. He wanted to grow the club. I mean, I think we were playing some quite staid stuff prior to that, and he wanted it to be better. He wanted it to be more exciting. For better or worse, he would have made a lot of mistakes, especially later on in his tenure. But certainly early on, to go out and get somebody like Ron Atkinson was incredible because we went almost instantaneously from, I can't remember what the gates were, but he put 5, 6, 7, 8,000 on the gate almost immediately. Yeah. And I think part and parcel of his salary was he got paid on the extra number of people that would go to games. I mean, that was the pull of Ron Atkinson at the time, larger than life. And a great guy to be in, and all of a sudden, from probably having, generally the local papers, the local TV, and occasionally a big game, the Nationals would turn up. We were on the front page every single week, and generally filling or getting close to filling Highfield Road at times.
And suddenly the purse strings were off, weren't they?
Well, they were, and we started to buy exciting footballers. I sometimes wonder what people like, Bobby Gould and Phil Neal, a few years previous to it, must have thought, if they'd have been given the opportunity to buy, the likes of people like Whelan coming in, Dion Dublin, you had the Moroccans. So many exciting players were starting to come in, and the good thing is we started to build a really good team environment as well. What can I say? The team spirit was probably as good then, or nearly as good then as what we had in '87. I mean, then we felt that the togetherness of the players was incredible. It got us results on the pitch. And there's no doubt around the 96, 97, 98, 99 period, some of that exciting football, that type of camaraderie and team spirit was in abundance off the pitch as well. Just they brought in some very, very good players, exciting players that excited the crowds as well and got great results. But we had some brilliant times off the pitch as well.
And then we had a situation where the number 2 got promoted again. Yes. Gordon Strachan taking over.
Yeah, we did, and again, I mean, Gordon was. You could see he was destined to become, a top manager, the same as had been a top player. I mean, when it came to, when it came as a player, he was the back end. He didn't really want to play. He was reluctant at the end to put the shirt on, and I think that Ron Atkinson persuaded him a number of times to play, and he just had real quality. A really, really good player. Top player, and you could see that he was going to go into management with the same philosophy. He wanted to be, the best manager as well. He studied it. Ron Atkinson was a people's person. Really, he could get the best out of players by talking, by setting the environment, by getting more out of you just by talking to you. Gordon Strachan was different. He got the best out of you by improving you as a player. He was a really, really good coach on the training pitch. Probably, that's what you got now with head coaches. He felt his strengths late on the training pitch, building teams, improving players. And there's no doubt about it, the young players that he brought into the football club, people like Darren Huckabee, we talked about Noel Whelan, you know, and quite a number of others. He improved them. He got better. And, you know, it was a really good period of time. Very, very good coach was Gordon Strachan. And I think the fact that, you know, he's managed where he has managed, he's done the, you know, he's done the national job for Scotland for quite a number of years. You know, it just shows he was always going to be a success in management, the same as he was as a player.
So he obviously had a long spell as manager, almost 4 years in the hot seat, and perhaps carried the can for relegation from the Premiership.
Yeah, I don't really know how that happened, because we'd had some really good years in the Premiership, exciting years, and finished in good positions. And then, you know, the year we got relegated, I'm not saying this was the reason, but I'd retired. So I'd done it. So I'd retired. He'd asked me to go on the coaching staff. So I was working with the academy at the time, doing the under 17s, really enjoying myself. So I was grateful that he'd given me the opportunity to launch a career after playing. So I wasn't quite as close to the first team that particular year that we got relegated. You know, we did. You know, when the first team were playing, we'd often have games somewhere else, so you couldn't see all of them. We still had some very, very good players that year, and you know, it just, I don't know. I think we just had a problem trying to win away from home, if I recall. Where we were exciting to watch, we played some good football, but for some reason we just couldn't do it away from home, and I think that was the downfall of the club, really. You know, we'd had so many years where we'd been in a relegation dogfight and managed to survive. I suppose it was only at some point, sometime it was going to catch up with us, and it did that particular year.
Do you think it might have been different if Strachan had been sacked sooner? We might have stayed up with a...
I don't think so. I think, you know, as I say, I think Gordon was a really good manager, and he brought, you know, good success and exciting. He played, you know, he got exciting teams and played exciting football the years prior. So I think that the club were trying to, what can I say, to trying to keep him together, thought he could get through it, and for one reason or another we didn't. The worst place to get relegated, of course, was at Aston Villa, which is where we did, and the way that we did it, I went to that game, we'd got no game, and we got 2-0 up. I think Adji had scored a couple of goals, hadn't he? And it looked like the Great Escape may be on again, but again we faltered in the second half and couldn't quite do it.
So Roland Nielsen took over, an untried manager, and actually got us quite close to getting in the playoffs until a dramatic collapse in the last half a dozen games. I think the feeling was he'd done really well as a manager,
well, he has, and I've played with. I played with him as well. A really, really nice guy, classy footballer. And I think the problem was it was his first job. He'd not really done a great deal of coaching. He brought Jim Smith in to be number 2 at the time. And I think the problem was once we'd been relegated, the fans, the club, everybody expected us to immediately get back in the year after. I think history shows you just how difficult that is. I mean, we talk about Coventry's demise in the noughties, but so many teams have done exactly the same. You know, they've been really good Premiership sides, suddenly got relegated, and then struggled in the league below. I don't know why that is, but that was certainly the case then. We got ourselves into a decent position, but if truth be told, we just weren't good enough to probably get up that season, and it cost Roland his job, obviously.
Well, there was no parachute payments then, were there?
Well, there wasn't, and I think ITV had. I think there was payment for ITV, wasn't there? There was a deal done with ITV, so we were going to get money for that, and then I think they went bust that particular year. So the money, I think we'd spent money on the back of actually that deal. And when that had gone belly up, that put the club in a little bit of a problem. And of course, we've got the stadium, the new stadium that was in the background as well. I mean, the new stadium was supposed to be there for Premiership football. And, along the way, I think maybe people took I'm talking about the board now and everything like that, took the eye off the ball, really, thinking about the new stadium. And, we just lost it on the pitch then.
And we went through a period then, didn't we, Jim, of pretty much a manager every season, I think, for quite a few years.
Yes, well, Gary McAllister followed Roland. But I should add that you were the caretaker after Roland left, weren't you?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, me and Trevor Peake actually caretaker. So I think we had the last game of one season. We played Burnley, 100% record, by the way, Jim. So I tell you, played one, lost one. But it was the last game of the season, and we were playing Burnley at the time. I remember it. I think they were just in the playoffs at the time. It was a difficult game for us. I think Gary McSheffrey made his debut that day, and it was the one time that I took the football club with Trevor.
So obviously Gary McAllister came in and had to face a situation, I guess, where there was a lot of cost cutting.
And it was a difficult time at the club because we'd got the stadium. The club was struggling, financially. You could feel that. I was a coach at the time, so you knew it. The quality of players that we were going after were not going to get us back into the Premiership, but yet the fans expected us to get back into the Premiership. I think the board expected us to get back in the Premiership, but the investments just weren't there. And I think Brian Richardson had gone, McGinnity had come in as chairman, and they were all doing the best, but there's no doubt about it. The stadium was, I think the intentions were very, very good, but at the time it was probably the worst decision the club made. I think it cost us relegation. It wasn't, it didn't turn out to be what everybody thought it would be. It cost the club an awful lot of money, and it took us a long time to recover from it.
So Gary obviously had the sadness of his wife and his wife's illness and had to step down. And Eric Black took over, and that was quite an exciting period for the club.
Well, it was, and Eric Black, good football man, Eric Black. I mean, he's been a coach for many people, Scotland as well. He knows the job, and he actually did a pretty good job as a manager, if I remember rightly. At the time, we were playing some good football. Was he in charge when we beat Walsall? Was it 6 or 7 or something like that?
Yeah, I think he was. Yeah,
that was incredible. I think there were some other goals where we were, some other games we were scoring, but again, it was the board that was wanting to bring a bigger name in, and. He didn't lose his job through results or through the way the team was playing. He lost his job because the board wanted to bring in a big name.
Yes, which actually was in retrospect, was a very, very poor decision.
Yes, it was. Because it didn't work, and invariably those type of things don't. It's it was a real shame, but. By that time, the club was spiralling. We were having problems at boardroom level. Who was chairman? There was talk about takeovers every week, and then money was tight. We eventually went into administration, but there was always that hanging over you. We had the move to the new ground as well during that period. But things weren't right. Every year you felt we were going to get better, but every year we seemed to get that little bit worse. And it was a drip effect. You couldn't see it coming. In hindsight, we probably should have done, but at the time, you always felt, right, get 1 year out, the next year will be better. The ball would come down, the chairman would talk, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But, in fairness to all the managers, really, that managed after that time, I don't think they were ever given enough resources to do the job that the club wanted them to do. And ultimately, it was to get back into the Premier League. Yeah,
I think it was almost like there was a cloud over over Coventry City.
I mean, if you go through it, Peter Reid came in. I don't think his heart was in the job, but to be fair to Peter, he just decided to leave. He didn't take anything for the club. He didn't ask, for redundancy or a payment. He just said, "No, I've had enough. I'm leaving." Adrian Heath was around at the time, really chirpy guy. He's doing well in America at the moment as a coach. And then you had people like Mickey Adams. I'm just trying to think. Ian Dowie. Adi Boothroyd, all of them came into the club. Chris Coleman probably had a little bit more than the others in terms of finance and what the club were doing. I think CCFC had just taken over at the time, hadn't they? And it was that period where they were starting to fund the club, a little bit in those initial periods. And you certainly, when Chris came in, that was the time when I thought, if we're going to get back in the Premier League, he's going to be the guy that's going to do it. And the noises were good. We'd just come from a takeover. And at that time, we thought CC might be good for the club. Are we no different now? And things were just spiralling the wrong way, really.
I'm interested to know a bit more about Adi Boothroyd, because I always felt he was given a bad rap. He took us into the top six, I think, in the start of the year, after Christmas, and he had 3 or 4 defeats, and all of a sudden he was gone.
Again, the club were not interested in middle of the table. They felt that we should be getting promotion, being in the playoff areas. And Adi was a good young manager. He'd done well at Watford and been somewhere else as well, hadn't he? And he, very bright, very, very new manager. I think the problem was, and I think Ray Ranson appointed him. Ray Ronson wanted the team to play football, and I think that, and I don't know this for definite, but this is the way I got it. I think Adi had said, yes, we're going to play attractive football, but as soon as Adi came in, he played a different style of football. He played very direct. I think that knocked Ray Ranson a little bit because he didn't want to see his football club doing that. Right. And I think the first opportunity he got to change things, he took. And I think a lot of it was down to the style of football we were playing rather than results.
Right. Because Adi did have that reputation for.
Well, it did do. A little bit like everything. Listen, every football manager has got a way and a style and a method of playing football, and there's no right or wrong way. No. Route 1 football was very successful for teams, particularly in the 90s. When I look back at Wimbledon, at Watford, at Sheffield United, there were quite a number of teams played it, and a lot of teams tried to copy it after, to get those type players. Not my cup of tea. I don't like that particular football, but some people even today like the classic 2 strikers, get the ball up front as quick as possible, play for the knockdowns, and take it from there. And Adi Boothroyd, was probably like that, and he'd got he'd got his team set up to play that way. They would play, but playing the opposition's off, but. It wasn't, for the purist, it wasn't the type of football I think that people like to see, and it's changed dramatically from the way it is now.
Our time's running out, but I think the one other manager I'd be keen to get your thoughts on is Tony Mowbray, because Tony, had one really good first half of the season, with the loanees, Adam Armstrong and Murphy and Ryan Kent. And then he had that dreadful close season where the club barely bought a player. And we had this dreadful start when Tony eventually walked out. What's your recollections of that period?
Well, first and foremost, a great guy, yeah. And he wants to play football, through the thirds. I mean, he wants to play pure football. That's all he's interested in. Yeah. And I think he was very frustrated playing Division 1 football that he couldn't play that way. He wouldn't change the way that he played. He'd byplay. You had people like Lemarius. You talked about Armstrong and Murphy and everything. We had some fantastic players that could break and score goals, and it was exciting. Problem is, when they ran out of steam in the second half of the season, the results dried up. the goals dried up. And the biggest problem was the team had so many good ball players. One of the things that you have to address in Division 1 and Division 2 is set plays. You need to have big, strong, physical players to be able to either score goals, but particularly stop teams scoring against you. And, if memory serves me correct, we used to have a lot of problems, at set plays at both ends, because we had such good footballers, but they probably weren't physically strong enough at certain times. And that wasn't going to get us out of Division 1. It'd get us playing pretty football, it'd get us playing good results. But, Tony Mowbray knew that he would struggle to do it. And he said many times to me, he said, I can't manage in Division 1. He says, it's not my type of football. And, I think he wrestled with this so many times. And in the early part of the season when he quit, wasn't it? He just felt that, he wasn't enjoying, watching and having to play the type of football that he wasn't, that he didn't believe in, really.
Right. Do you think Tony Mowbray would be a good fit for the club now?
Very good. Because he plays pure football. He knows Championship. I think you see the jobs that he's done in the Championship for Blackburn, for Sunderland, for probably for Birmingham until obviously he got ill and he had to leave that club. I'm sure when he and I believe he's making a really good recovery, so that's great. I'm looking forward to seeing where he turns up. I don't think it's going to be at Coventry, but wherever he does, it's going to be Championship football. I'm absolutely sure of that. And he puts out a side that's exciting, that's good to watch, and not everybody's cup of tea, as I say. It depends what type of football you like, but I like his style of football, and it's a successful style at this level.
Well, I think that half a season, 2015-16, when we had the loanees under Tony, I thought that was the best football we'd seen for probably almost 20 years.
Well, we had a really good period with Stephen Presley, didn't we? When we had the two strikers, up front. We were playing at Northampton. There were dismal times, but we were scoring lots of goals then, weren't we?
Yes.
So I particularly remember that period. They're the highlights, really, of those dark days of Division 1 and Division 2. You mentioned Tony Mowbray, the Stephen Presley one. When we were scoring those goals and playing exciting football as well. But those days were few and far between, weren't they? Between 2010 and 2019, really.
Yeah. So Presley was a gentleman as well, wasn't he?
Oh, he was. Yeah. Stephen Presley is a real football man. He wants to do things the right way. Yeah. He's totally, if you appoint Stephen Presley, you get 100% of Stephen Presley. He will work morning, noon, and night to try and get success, and that's what he does.
Yeah. Well, we've had some. We haven't mentioned Russell Slade, have we?
Probably just as well.
But I think before we do finish off, obviously, I'm sure you'd like to say something about Mark Robins, Steve, if you can do it in a couple of minutes.
Well, a couple of minutes for 7 years. Well, Mark Robins, listen, you talk about Jimmy Hill, you talk about John Sillett and George Curtis, and for me, Mark Robins, is alongside them. For many, many years, well, forever, we're going to be talking about the years of success that Mark Robins brought to the football club. You've got to remember when he came in, we were on the cusp of being relegated to Division 2. Yeah. He got us out of Division 2. We had a year in Division 1 where we consolidated. Then we got promotion from Division 1. A couple of years of consolidation in the Championship, but year on year we got better. So I think we were. I can't remember what the positions were, but every year we improved. And then we ultimately managed to get into the playoffs, didn't we? We were, what can I say, a penalty kick away from the Premier League. How close was that? And then the year after, a toenail away from an FA Cup final. And, he's not done that the easy way. He's been thrown a lot of curveballs. He's had some difficult things to do along the time. When you think of the previous owners, CC were very, very difficult to work with. They wanted out for many, many years, even before they did get out. But he managed to create a relationship with them, And he worked with the players that he got. He's built 3 or 4 different sides during that period. He's coped with having to play away at Birmingham, COVID. I know everybody else has had to deal with that. Then we had the problem with the pitch where we had to play 7 or 8 away games 2 years ago. All these things he's taken into his stride. He's never really moaned about them, and he's managed to produce winning sides and entertaining sides. The football
what's really weird is today with the honorary doctorate for Coventry University, and I'm looking at him and I had to pinch myself and remind me he's not our manager anymore. That's what was weird. I still haven't really got used to it, and I think that's the same for a lot of fans. So
I think so. I mean, listen, after 7 years of success and with all the things that he'd done, I'm surprised that the club, and again, Doug King, I think, has been good for the football club so far. Generally speaking, the decisions that he's made, I think, have been good. He's spent a lot of money behind the scenes on things that people won't see. The training ground now is, unbelievably good, and that's cost, more than a few million. I'm sure about that. But I think he's funded the team. And, generally speaking, I think he's talked a good game, but I just think this was a poor decision from him, and only time will tell what'll happen. But, I think he's pulled the plug a little bit too early. I mean, Mark Robins, this time last year, we had the same number of points. The year before that, I think we were similar. We're poor starters. Now you obviously don't want that to continue, but I think that we've proven that, or Mark Robins has proven that he can turn it around. And obviously the AD Vivash departure has had a far bigger impact than probably people felt.
Yeah, Jim, any more from you?
Yeah, just on the Mark Robins thing, I just fear that we could be repeating the John Sillett scenario, where we get rid of a manager because he hasn't taken us, quite high enough. We've had some great years with Mark Robins, and a slight dip and he's out. And I just fear that the wrong management appointment could see us back in the doldrums.
Well, you're absolutely right. It's a critical time. And Mark Robins used to always say, you've got to manage expectations. And I'm not sure the club have done that particularly. There's enough evidence in previous years to show that, we can actually do what we have done in the last 2 years. If you, listen, I'm not a big one, all the time for stats, but if you have a look at the Opta Index, the expected points for Coventry is 24-25 this year. They're predicting us to be around the 4th or 5th for chances created, etc., etc. So it's a team that's underperforming in terms of points, but not underperforming in terms of, opportunities and chances and things going forward. So, when you look at the data, I don't think he's certainly not been sacked on the data, that's for sure. Yeah. So, a disappointing decision and a massive decision he's got to get right.
And the reaction from the fans of other clubs, there wasn't any, he deserved to go. Every other fan I've spoken to of Championship clubs say, you must be mad to sack him.
Well, it goes with that. So I can't believe Doug King wouldn't have known that, because we were talking about it prior to the sacking. Just, what great esteem he's felt, throughout the footballing kingdom. People know what a great job he's done for the football club, and I think they're just very surprised. And as I say, Doug King is going to make sure that the decision to bring in a new manager is a good one, because they're big boots to fill, aren't they?
Yeah,
I think that's a good place to leave it, Jim. What do you think?
Steve, thank you so much. It's been a fabulous hour, and really enjoyed chatting about the old days. Fantastic.
Brilliant, enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah. We'll have to have you on again and talk about some of the players next time.
I can't believe it's 7:10.
Oh, I can. Well, thanks very much for those listening and for those who are watching, because this will go out on YouTube as well. And of course, we're at the bottom there. If you want to follow anything about Coventry City Football Club, any subject, that's our email, jim@claryborton@gmail.com, and we'll pick a subject that you choose and we'll try and talk about it as best as we can. Well, thanks very much. Thank you, Steve, and ta-ra, everybody.
Company business. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Thank you.